Hey guys, today is Wednesday, August 1st, 2018, and we have our monthly 2018 Senate election predictions. So, starting around September, I will start doing them every 2 weeks so we can have a more updated map because, of course, not something will change every week. Going into October, we will have a Senate video every single week, and then, of course, the general election is a week after October. So, we're looking at the 2018 Senate map. Here's the current composition of the United States Senate: 51 Republicans, 47 Democrats, with 2 independents who caucus with them every time. And both of those independents so happen to be up for re-election in 2018. We're going to start off by filling in the safe states for the Republican Party just to show how well they have a standing in the United States Senate at this point in time. Mississippi and the Mississippi special election, of course, are safe Republican seats, along with Nebraska, Wyoming, and the state of Utah. So this puts the Republicans at a very big advantage over the Democrats. They currently have 47 safe seats in their column, which means that even if we do go and look at the Senate map, we have 30 seats. And the Republicans only need 3, a tenth of what is currently contested on this map right now, in order to hold the majority, retain the majority, keep the Democrats from being able to take the majority away from them, and only 4 seats to hold their current standing, because if we look at the current Senate, we have 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats, and they currently have 47 Republican seats. And there are currently 10 states that Donald Trump won in 2016 with Democratic incumbents, states like Montana, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, Florida, and Missouri. And those are the states that currently have Democratic incumbents where Donald Trump won in back in 2016. So this map could be very interesting. But there are a number of Democratic incumbents who are currently rated as safe, which is going to boost their numbers up right now. Washington, California. California doesn't even have a Republican on the ballot. Over in the Northeast, of course, these states are solid for the Democratic Party. Can't say the same thing for the governor's race we're going to cover a little bit later. Over in Minnesota, I would say the approval rating of the both incumbent senators actually is enough to push them over the top. And of course, New Mexico is typically a Democratic state. Senator Tim Kaine is probably not going to lose to Corey Stewart. I mean, Tim Kaine winning in 2016 in that state with Hillary Clinton, he's probably not going to lose a re-election bid in a Democratic wave year. Keep that in mind. And a lot of people have been commenting things like this is not a Democratic wave year. You can't deny the fact that the Democratic Party is going to do much better than they do in previous elections. Okay, there's not going to be some huge red wave or, red tsunami that a lot of people are wanting for the Republican Party. I understand the argument that the Democratic Party could be doing a lot better, but they're probably not going to lose and, lose a number of seats. Maybe in the Senate. I don't see them losing a number of seats, as you will see at the end of this prediction, but when it comes down to it, the House is probably going to either flip or get very close for the Democrats and the Republican Party, only because there is going to be a number of excited voters. We've seen it in turnout amongst primary elections, such as the state of Kentucky, where there were a number of Democrats who came out in a number of congressional districts that really weren't there before. And we see it in a number of special elections, the Alabama special election, or the Virginia governor race, New Jersey governor race, or Pennsylvania 18th District special election, or the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. A number of these elections that we've been seeing leading up into 2018 all favor the Democratic Party. And speaking of the Rust Belt, speaking of states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, these states likely are in the Democratic column. The approval ratings of all 3 senators here have gone up since the second quarter, I believe, going into the third quarter of 2018. And right now, they're at a pretty good standing for winning re-election, especially since there's not many that good GOP opponents like we're going to see in a number of other states like Montana, which we can go over to now. Montana goes to the Democrats. Matt Rosendale was not the best GOP nominee that they could have put up, but he is a GOP nominee in a predominantly Republican state. This is a state Donald Trump won by double digits in 2016, but still Jon Tester is at a pretty good standing at winning re-election in his state of Montana. I believe he was first elected in 2006 against a Republican incumbent, so the first time he was elected was in a Democratic wave year. Another time he's been re-elected was in another Democratic wave year, and this is a third Democratic wave year for Jon Tester. So he got very lucky. So Montana goes to the Democrats, putting their number at 43, and the Republicans have 47. When it comes down to it, Texas is probably not going to flip. We see Texas either leaning or likely in the Democratic column, but all opinion polling is showing this one is a little bit more of a likely state, and also not just opinion polling, because that's not the only things you can factor in. Previous elections showed Ted Cruz winning here. And also, we have a number of approval polls that come out of Texas, because Texas is a very large state. Ted Cruz is at a very, very good standing in terms of approval polls. I believe his recent approval rating was 48%. Doesn't sound too good, but when you look at the disapproval rating of 35%, it looks a whole lot better. This puts the Republicans at 48 seats, the Democrats at 43. So looking at these numbers, the Republican Party easily should win and retain the majority, right? Well, when it comes down to it, there are a number of these key races, like in Tennessee, West Virginia, Arizona, Missouri. A number of these key Republican states in presidential elections have now become close or leaning in the Democratic Party's favor. Going over to Ohio and West Virginia, these two states are likely to remain in the Democratic column. And by likely, I mean putting into the leaning column, because the margin is probably going to be leaning in the favor of the Democratic Party, but probably between 1% to 5%. Joe Manchin and Sherrod Brown are both at a good standing for re-election. Sherrod Brown with the lack of a good GOP opponent, which the GOP failed to draft very good nominees in each of these races. And West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey isn't polling too well against Joe Manchin. Also, the approval rating of Joe Manchin is pretty high. Of course, President Trump's is higher because Donald Trump did phenomenal in this state back in 2016. But West Virginia will likely remain in the Democratic column for giving the Democrats 45 seats and the Republicans, of course, at 48. So we go over to some other states, such as Florida. Actually, I want to come to Florida last, but we can go over to Nevada and Arizona. Nevada right now, Dean Heller's approval rating has since dropped from the second quarter, and his overall base is really not really coming out and voting. When we're talking about the type of voters that got people like Dean Heller elected in the first place, these were Republican voters. Nevada is no longer a Republican state. In order to win in this election, he would have to convince a number of Clinton voters to vote for him for his re-election bid. And his approval rating isn't going to help with that either. Jackie Rosen being that woman, I guess, type candidate who can actually win, being a congressman from the 3rd District as a Democrat, a lot of the standings in Nevada really push towards a Jackie Rosen victory in the state. Dean Heller, actually, I believe he may be one of the most unpopular senators in the United States, especially from the Republican Party, because typically the Republican Party does phenomenal with approval ratings, not just in the governor's races, but also in the Senate races. I believe actually the lowest approval rating is the Republican Majority Leader, but that's expected because it is Mitch McConnell, and it's been around there since 2014, even though he did win re-election by a considerable amount. So Nevada goes blue. Another state going blue in the Sun Belt, the state of Arizona. Kyrsten Sinema is currently leading all of her Republican opponents, some by 22%, and the lowest is around 8%. So still, she is at a very good standing for winning re-election. Jeff Flake has a net negative 21% approval rating, meaning 21% or more of Arizona citizens disapprove of Jeff Flake than approve of him. 51% to 30%. So that's not going to be good for any GOP candidate or any GOP nominee that wants to go up against a popular Democratic nominee who already is polling extremely well against all Republican opponents. This puts the Democrats at 47 seats and the Republicans at 48. And I'm surprised the GOP keeps ignoring the state of Arizona. They are behind in every single opinion poll, yet the GOP fails to acknowledge that they're going to lose a state, and this could be a very big possibility for a Democratic pickup. They can win Missouri, but if they lose Arizona, it's the same exact composition. So when it comes down to it, the Republican Party really needs to focus on a number of these key Democratic states that are probably going to either flip or there are Republican incumbents that have a great possibility of flipping. Another state with a Republican incumbent, the state of Tennessee, that one, Phil Bredesen is at the advantage at flipping right now. He is currently leading in all opinion polls. He left office, again, with the 70% approval rating. The point must be repeated because it stands very well. The last time he was elected, re-elected per se, was in the 2006 Democratic wave year. He won every single county in the state of Tennessee in his re-election bid for governor. So when it comes down to it, he's probably going to win this election. And Marsha Blackburn, she is an amazing GOP candidate in my opinion. I really do think that if it was any other type of election, she would be at the 90% chance of winning. But Phil Bredesen right now seems like he can resonate very well with a number of Tennessee voters, and also just having that name recognition around the state compared to other nominees who come from mayors of bigger cities and are known there but not anywhere else in the state. It comes down to Phil Bredesen being known and a number of people coming out and voting for a Democratic nominee, because a number of these states we saw in the 2020 election based off previous stating voting history. Tennessee, a number of these actually every single state in the Deep South, the Confederate South, was Democratic. So keep that in mind. Tennessee, a number of these states are Democratic at heart. Not right now per se, but also West Virginia used to have a Democratic governor before he switched to the GOP. Missouri has a Democratic incumbent senator. Kentucky has a great possibility of going to the Democrats when it comes down to the 2019 governor election, along with the state of Mississippi. Georgia has a number of conservative Democratic tendencies. Florida has a Democratic senator. So a number of these states, Louisiana has a Democratic governor right now. So a number of these states are prone to electing Democrats. Especially in the Democratic wave year, it seems much more likely that Phil Bredesen does get elected. But there are some states that are going to flip to the GOP. Heidi Heitkamp is likely to lose her re-election bid against Kevin Cramer, the sole representative from the state of North Dakota. Right now, she is polling behind him. Her approval rating is not good compared to her other Democratic colleagues that are up for re-election in a number of these states, not just safe states, but obviously in some of these closer states. The approval rating for Sherrod Brown in Ohio is better than the approval rating of Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. I'm not going to say it's the worst that I've seen because it is a tie between 44% approve and 44% disapprove, but Kevin Cramer has a higher approval rating. He's currently polling ahead, so all indications are showing that this state is probably going to flip to the GOP. Another state that is probably going to flip, the state of Indiana. Joe Donnelly will likely lose against Mike Braun, and when it comes down to it, his approval rating is positive 8%. Donald Trump's is positive 5%. So obviously that argument, you would say Joe Donnelly would win. But Mike Braun is leading in opinion polls. Actually, a new poll from SurveyMonkey just came out that shows Mike Braun leading by 2%, 49 to 47. And also, when we're looking at this state itself, we're likely going to see a number of Trump rallies here. This is a state that Mike Pence is from. Going to see a lot of Republican excitement here in a Democratic wave year. Probably that smaller pocket for the GOP to actually have a safe area, whereas they go over to states like Missouri or Florida or Arizona or Tennessee. Even though these are Republican states from 2016, they have much better standings for the Democrats than they do in the state of Indiana. Speaking of the state of Missouri, we're going to go over and characterize that race as a blue state. Claire McCaskill got very lucky with her GOP nominee, as she did in 2012 as well. And when it comes down to it, Claire McCaskill is leading in every outsider poll, meaning polls that are actually taken outside of smaller pockets of the state just to favor one candidate or one agenda. And it just goes to show that she is a very, very good candidate. She was someone that the GOP wanted to target before. They thought that she was extremely vulnerable, and yes, she was extremely vulnerable. But we are less than 100 days away from the midterm elections, and she is just getting better in terms of approval, getting better. Her approval rating is not necessarily skyrocketing, but it's also maintaining around that same level that she won re-election, that she could win re-election in. And Missouri right now, even though it is a predominantly Republican state, I get that. That's an argument. Every single one of these states, 10 of these states went for Donald Trump in 2016, yet somehow the Democrats are winning in most of them. And it all comes down to the power of the incumbency. When we're looking at the state of Missouri, this one could likely go to the Democrats, especially with a faulty GOP nominee. I've been repeating that point again because it needs to be said. The GOP failed to field extremely good candidates as the Democrats were able to do in 2006. But also, they did in 2010. They did in 2014. The GOP did phenomenal at that. They probably didn't do it this year because it's not their wave year. It is not their time to shine. They're just holding on to the House. They're holding on to the Senate. And they're trying to figure out a way to not lose a number of seats. So the GOP is already at the majority, which is why I refer to it as holding on to the Senate. I'm not so sure about the House just yet, but I'm not doing a House prediction, obviously. I may do a House election night pretty soon. But right now, the Democrats are at 49 seats. So it comes down to the state of Florida, and this is the one I wanted to talk about the most. The state of Florida, as of right now, before this state was leaning in the Republican column, right now I'm actually going to put the state as leaning in the Democratic column. Bill Nelson currently has a net 8% approval rating, meaning 8% of Florida voters approve of him more than disapprove. Rick Scott has positive 18, and I get it. When it comes down to it, Rick Scott seems like he should win. He is narrowly leading by less than 1% in approval polls, but also I'm looking at recent election history, like I mentioned before with Ted Cruz, I believe, that you have to look at recent election history. Just because someone is leading right now in polls, as Phil Bredesen is in Tennessee, if you look at his most recent election, he won every single county in the state of Tennessee. Also, if you look at Kristen Sinema in Arizona, it looks like she would win this election based off recent election history. Same thing for Ted Cruz. Same thing for Kevin Cramer in North Dakota. Can't say the same thing for Mike Braun in Indiana, but there are different factors, especially since it is the state of Indiana. But the state of Florida, let's go ahead and take a look at the governor election in 2010. Rick Scott won by less than 2%. Actually, I believe it was 1.2% to be exact, in a Republican wave year. This is a year where the Republican Party won more than, I believe, more than 60 seats in the United States House of Representatives, flipping it from blue to red. One of the biggest majorities the Democrats had in the modern political era flipped to the Republican side. So this was a year the Republicans should have done phenomenal, even in a swing state like the state of Florida. The same argument a lot of people are making for the blue wave. Bill Nelson, I likely expect to narrowly edge out Rick Scott in this Senate race here because I just recently saw those new approval polls where he's not underwater, like many people have been saying. He did not narrowly win his 2012 election. He won it by 13%. Keep that in mind. And yes, Obama was on the ballot, but it's still a 13% margin. Obama won by less than 1% in the state of Florida, so it wasn't just that. If we're looking at the 2010 numbers, well, maybe it was just his first election. The power of incumbency is always better, right? Well, we look at 2014, and he won by a smaller margin. He won by 1% against Charlie Crist. Granted, he was a former Republican governor running on the Democratic side, so that's not necessarily the best thing for that Democratic nominee. He won by 1%. Rick Scott won by 1% in 2014, the Republican wave year for the United States Senate. So when it comes down to it, there's a reason why Rick Scott underperforms in Republican wave years. There's no reason why he should overperform in a Democratic wave year. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.